It's great to have you back, Kana. Thank you. So, Kana, you're the founder and CEO of the Global Impact Group, and you've been working very proactively in supporting social enterprise and your local community. And I know that you're here today to talk to us about the grand reconfiguration. So what does that mean? Before I hand over the floor to you, and what does that mean? And how did you select that as a topic that you wanted to present at the Impact Forum?
Thank you so much, Brett. So many layers to that question. Thank you so much for yourself and Adrian and each of the organizers and the creators and founders of UNIT for creating, curating, inviting and sharing this platform, and offering us all an opportunity to discuss and learn and listen to each other's realities right now. And this Anthropocene that you were mentioning earlier, this is really pivotal times that we're living through. And so these multiple layers of existential crises or potential existential crises that we're confronted with. And so the grand reconfiguration is very, very real and present for me, in the sense that, likely a number of you know that there's the grand resignation as well happening. So, there's so much reflection currently happening. And so it's important to take stock, to reflect, how we've come to where we are and where we are now and where we would like to go together. And so for me, systems change in co-creating a new regenerative world is so vital. We have this opportunity to redesign our systems and to learn from timeless wisdom traditions that I know you and I both love and respect, multiple wisdom traditions. And, a number of our friends and colleagues on this call live in Australia, for example. And it's so important I feel, for each of us to honor that we're all Indigenous to the earth, whether or not we're connected with an active Indigenous culture or not. And we have so much to learn from these wisdom custodians, and equally to honor ourselves as these new regenerative custodians and stewards.
Great, thank you, Kana. Yeah, thank you. So, so you're going to present to us today, is that right?
Yes, and so just welcoming everyone from where you are. I'm streaming in from Darugland, and it's a region, indigenous name for a place in Sydney, and deeply honouring the custodians and the elders who've tended to this land and culture for millennia, and honouring the emerging leaders and elders to come. Currently with, is someone else on microphone?
You're right.
Okay, all good. So Frontier Regen Capital is currently what I'm working on, and it's a fund that's focused on building intermediary systems, the systems that are important to co-creating a new economy and a new regenerative world. So we're very focused on supporting the gaps within the gaps, and a lot of these gaps aren't as obvious as for example, plastic trash on the ground. It's legislation, it's policies, it's structural institutions that support the growth of our next economy and our next world. So, for example, in Indonesia, I was really delighted to learn recently that with Islamic finance, of the introduction of sukuks, which is basically finance and green loans and social loans without usury, so without interest, which is fascinating to me, coming from and growing up from a Western paradigm where usury and interest is way too prevalent, in my opinion. So how do we then support and invest in the growth of these regenerative investment models? There's currently, a number of stock exchanges around the world, and I know, and I'd love to speak further about what I understand of the DAOs, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization. As far as I understand, Unit Network is one of them. How do we support the growth of the DAOs on the blockchain? And equally, how do we interface with institutions like the current stock exchanges and the current institutions that are guiding and stewarding so much value in our world? how do we interface with them and regenerate their systems? Because there is a lot of attention and a lot of momentum in that field. You may be aware of the SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There is a collective cohort of businesses, multilateral institutions, people who are passionate about this field, the growth of sustainable finance and the growth of impact finance. There's a collective goal to mobilize $80 trillion over the next 3 decades. What's most important and what's most concerning, I find, is that there's a lot of players in that space where they're greenwashing and they're impact washing, and a lot of the players in this field who respectfully perhaps don't deserve as much of this funding are claiming this space before a lot of the social entrepreneurs and really heart-centered people and heart-centered practitioners, wellness practitioners, in my opinion, actually deserve it more. So then how do we bridge these worlds and create lexicon that translate and bridge more of this unified action moving forward?
Those are very powerful questions, Kana, and I do wonder how you've gone in your contemplations in identifying, some solutions to bridging some of these big issues. So for instance, if we're talking about impact finance as an example, so there are people investing into impact projects, but really their investment profiles are much the same as if they were investing into anything.
That's right.
They're looking for profitable projects. So it's reasonably debatable whether or not it is actually an impact investment.
That's right, or whether it's actually green or what they propose to and what they claim to invest in. And so, like with any truly wise civilization and society, we need to set very strong, disciplined standards. And so then that's at the very top and at the very core of each of our decision making. And so we're talking creating new stock exchanges, we're creating new ratings agencies. For example, S&Ps and Moody's currently are the ones that are leading, or Bloomberg, for example. We need to create multiple institutions in multiple jurisdictions that have the discipline and have the wisdom to be able to decide what's of true value and true wealth on a local, regional, national, and a global level, and then a multi-generational level, and really be audacious with that mission, and be unafraid to actually meet the current players at their quote-unquote game, and then take it further. So those are some examples. The standards, it's creating a whole new legion of impact investment funds, whole new legions of asset managers, legal firms, accounting firms, you name it. And it's interesting, it's exciting because the interest is there. I mean, in the sense that there's certain visionaries that have a pulse about this, have a sense about, okay, look, well, we've got the opportunity, let's not create more of the same, more of the previous world. Let's truly, really focus on creating what's necessary for true regeneration. And so that includes including many more Indigenous voices, many more voices who are world bridges, who can, like, Janu earlier, who are somatic practitioners and entrepreneurs, and also social entrepreneurs. And it's really creating this new mythos and new archetype of what it requires, in what we all require to create a regenerative world.
So when you mention Indigenous wisdom as an example, what in your mind, what part does Indigenous wisdom have to play in the regeneration of the biosphere?
Well, like many of the colleagues on this call and probably on the recording resonate with, I mean, nature has all the solutions, or in so many ways already. It's just a lot of the times we've forgotten, post-industrial revolution and so forth, and our Indigenous cultural custodians, on the whole, have have devoted themselves to be at one and in nurturance of nature's principles and nature's rhythms, rather than being devoid of them and being exploitative and cutting everything into parts, for example, which is what a lot of the modern world does. So it's not as much, it's not new to them as such, it's their way of being. And so it's so important for us as modern sapiens, modern humans, to humble ourselves to ask what we don't know, or what we don't know that we don't know, in order to really learn and listen. A dadiri is a concept in Australian Indigenous culture that means deep listening. So in many ways, it's us deeply listening to ourselves and each other, rather than rushing ahead. And even though I know it's a quote unquote race or a timeline, there's a timeline to our Earth's limits. So it's a confluence of different factors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the bigger challenges in impact is our ability to measure the impact that's being created. And certainly, where people are interested in buying impacts or seeking, if they're wanting to regenerate territories or to reduce the amount of carbon being emitted, or initiatives to sequester that carbon, measurement is one of the bigger challenges. I'm wondering if that's, if that's an area that you could speak on.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head, Brett. It's just only recently that COP26 there's been a barrage of, as in COP26, for people who don't know, it was the large climate change conference, the 26th version of it, and it stands for the Conference of Parties. And that happened in Glasgow, and now there's a barrage of announcements and so forth. One of the most important I found was the announcement of the ISSB, which stands for the International Sustainability Standards Board. So it's going to be a combination of different standards boards and different accounting methodologies to really discipline industry in terms of measuring impact and measuring sustainability. I haven't read it in detail yet because I haven't launched it yet. They're just putting the board together. But my intuition is that they wouldn't have deeply regenerative, multi-generational, indigenous, holistic type standards in there. And so that's one of the areas that is important for us to contribute to. Like Global Impact Group and Frontier Regen Capital, we invest in that in terms of creating that legislation or creating stricter standards. So but before that, the sustainability industry had all these disparate measurements and impact measurements. There's the GIN, the Global Impact Investing Network, and then the IFRS, and then the TFCD. And I know it's a bit of an acronym soup and a bit of jargon, but it was, given the meteoric rise in interest in sustainable investing and ethical finance, it was still confusing for fund managers and investors to even have a barometer to measure. So that's something that's really key to move forward with. I believe that we need an even more, we need an even new barometer of, so that we had the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, and then we have the SDGs. As an impact investor and as a field systems builder, I actually don't believe that it's enough. The SDGs aren't detailed enough, and it's not holistic and integrated enough. And I truly believe we need some RDGs, Regenerative Development Goals, and then to have that matched to a different index of progress. And so you may well be aware, Brett, that the GNH of the government of Bhutan, the Gross National Index of Happiness, and then there's been some other indicators like the Genuine Progress Indicator, GPIs. We need a whole different one that's very easily applicable to everyday people, and equally speaks the language of institutional investors and across the board. I mean, it's a mammoth challenge, but I feel like if we don't do that, I mean, in amongst many other priorities, then it's going to be a bit more of the same, and it's going to be a lot more suffering than is necessary.
So Richard posed an interesting point just around regenerative development. I don't know if Richard, if you'd like to chime in and share your thoughts on that. Are you on the call there? If you'd like to unmute yourself, maybe I can unmute you. Okay, I don't know if Richard's with us or not, but he did share a very interesting point.
Sorry guys, I was just in the garden. I'm not by my phone. I'm just planting some veggies. I just had to run back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
That's beautiful. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, you just had an interesting point. I wonder if you'd like to share that with us.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Yeah, just been working on some development strategies for a while, and one of them is something called Hyperculture, kind of like a biomimicry of the mycelium as a development strategy. And within that, one of the sort of core things that enables it was looking at septa, the sort of these baffles that run down the hyphal networks. And they're like these structural filters. And it's a perfect sort of metaphor for this teller, because what we realized was that in order to enable many of these things like the DAOs and other cryptocurrencies and other different things to grow, and especially community currencies, there needs to be a way that's not a binary, like one thing or the other. And the idea was to just do these percentage-based, multi-currency percentage-based negotiations. So you could essentially have a painter saying, if he's interested in the community currency, it's at a certain stage of its growth. He's, says to someone who's doing a job, he says, all right, I'll do it for 80% of whatever the local state currency is, and I'll do 20% in the community currency. So they agree, or they might adjust. They'll have little up arrows and down arrows, and they can have a negotiation. And that could be more than two. Obviously, you could have multiple different things, someone with crypto and other currencies, or maybe store credits, who knows? In other countries, you have things like phone credit as a form of negotiation. So what it functions is such a simple tool and so necessary, because it would enable the playing field to be even, so if the community currency wants to grow, it can grow stably. People don't have to decide, oh, you have to do this or this. You can do it based on the deal at the time, whatever the arrangement is. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. I think that's a really interesting opportunity just to touch on this idea of tokenization and part of what Unit has to offer. So we see, potentially tokenization in the impact context to be a little bit like crowdfunding 2.0 or 3.0, the Internet of Value. So traditionally in the crowdfunding space, you would, whether it's a rewards-based crowdfunding or an equity-based crowdfunding, you're working with platforms that are charging, 5% or more. And what people receive is they receive a little piece of a project. So what people receive is equity in the case of an equity project, or they received some type of reward for their participation. And what Unit has engineered is a possibility of people participating in your project at an exchange fee of 2%, which is less than half of what the traditional crowdfunding platforms would charge, and that 2% is distributed within the community that helps to enable that project. So, so it stays within the ecosystem. So that's something that we're quite passionate about. And so we see a world where in the future, Kana Leya is a passionate impact investor. In her wallet, she will have, water tokens and forest tokens, and she'll have some of Richard's tokens, and she'll have some of Jerome's tokens, and she'll have some of Tara's tokens because she supports Tara as an artist, and she'll hold tokens in projects that are also profitable projects as well. And so part of the strategy on the impact side in tokenizing is we try and create a supply squeeze against demand. So that people are actually want to participate in a project that's creating an impact, but all the tokens have already been sold, in which case they're being sold on the exchange at a higher rate. So it's a complex field to go in, and that would be a subject for a later discussion. But I just wanted to touch on that because that's unit being the sponsor of this project, of this conference, that essentially that's our objective, is to create pathways for impact projects to tokenize and to use blockchain technology.
Brett?
Beautiful, Brett. I love it. And it's exciting, sort of beginning of a new revolution of Web 3.0 tokenization economy. What I'm intrigued by, for example, then is, like the education capacity building development type, like understanding and awareness around this field en masse, like that would require investment, for example, right? So instead of one master's program in collaboration with one university, the unit could deploy to so many more universities and collaborations if there was systems investing in these gaps. I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, I mean, one system could be, so say I'm creating the Kana Leya's impact token. And so in Kana Leya's impact token, I will, you may say you issue 1 million tokens and you're going to give 20% of your tokens to 4 projects that you love. So, whatever those projects are going to be. So a fund for the koalas, a regenerative forest project, a regenerative river project, and a social impact project. So you just give them that 5%. And then the balance of that 80%, then you will buy tokens that are profit generating, as an example of how that could potentially be done.
Yes, so my question then is, are those enterprises that are profitable, quote unquote, would they also be aligned to social impact?
Well, that's, you get to design your project however you choose. But the model here is the possibility that as the value of your token grows, because you've taken a stake in projects that are profitable, that the projects that you've given tokens to, that the value of their tokens increases. So what I can see then is if I invest, say, $10,000 into Kana Leya's impact fund, that $10,000 over time could turn into $40,000 for the impact project that I love. So it's a complex subject that we can explore in more detail. But the opportunity is to design impact tokens that increase in value over time, which makes them desirable.
But I love it. I think, I mean, it's the way of the future. And what I'm, as someone who's a systems builder, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really interested and intrigued by how we support both the parallel worlds. So in terms of the tokenization and blockchain worlds and growing these impact markets and growing impact exchange, as much as interfacing with the current mainstream economy, which is also greenifying itself and social impactifying itself, and it needs more of us to have a voice and to be at the table whenever those major decisions are being made. It is, there's currently, I think there's something like $56 trillion that's going to be transferred in wealth multi-generationally over the next number of years. And so not all of that is going to go to blockchain. I mean, I hope a lot of that's going to go to blockchain. A lot of that is going to go to certain funds and certain advisors and brokers that people are quote unquote used to. So yeah, I feel like I'm a big supporter of parallel supporting what we need to do to move forward, because I mean, I'd love to hear your prediction of the tokenization economy, how long it will take to become mainstream. I mean, my prediction would be at least 5 to 10 years that it gains that traction. In the meantime, it's so important to invest in people who are doing such good work and so much potential that's not flourishing enough. So that hence why the regenerative essence of this new economy that's upon us.
Well, I mean, to answer your question around tokenization, there is zero chance that Disney will not tokenize. There is zero chance that organizations with very large networks will not tokenize as a strategy to access that capital and to deepen their relationships with their members. And so, you know, along the same lines, there's an opportunity for anyone who has a community network to tokenize. Cities have community networks, and we've seen that in the last 6 months, where Miami has created the Miami City token. New York has created the Miami token. The New York mayor has said, I'm prepared to take my salary in crypto. In fact, I'm prepared to be paid in New York tokens. And I think we'll increasingly see over the next 10 years that communities will tokenize, that cities will tokenize, that industries will tokenize, that schools will tokenize, and businesses will tokenize, where they can actually create their own sort of micro economies of sorts. And we can all have some level of ownership of the projects that we love. So I'll have the tokens of my local coffee shop because I want to see that succeed. I'll have tokens in Tara's art project because I want to see that succeed. I'll have tokens, you know, in Kana Leya in your projects because I believe you're going to be a very successful businesswoman and I want to have a piece of that. And you may believe
I hear you. I have no doubt that the tokenization movement is just going to continue to grow. I love it. And yeah, I'm not disputing that. I'm a big supporter of that. It's just supporting how we can all rise the tide as well, rather than just one or the other. And in regards to, for example, cities tokenizing, for example, I mean, do you mean security tokens? Because that's, or do you mean, I mean, there's distinctions within tokens, right? I'm a big supporter of security tokens. Are you meaning, is there a distinction between the tokens that you're speaking of, just to be specific?
Yeah, well, I mean, for our audience, what is a security? If a security token, it means it's actually, if it's considered a security, it means it's probably tied to an off-chain asset. And then as soon as things are considered securities, they become subject to ASIC regulation or SEC regulation, which adds another layer of complexity. So what I'm referring to is utility tokens. And that basically is a way of outflanking the complexities that are presented by whether it's the tax department or the regulatory authority. So that is to say that if I buy Kana Leya tokens, that would be a utility token. It's rather than Kana issuing me equity in an entity that's recognized by the state or federal government. So it's at this stage it's different. There will be security tokens as well, but that's another layer of complexity to which we probably don't have time to go into here. But I do see that Shane had a question, and I just wanted to invite Shane, if you'd like to chime in to share your question with us before we conclude the session.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, I was just, very interested to see how impact projects are being tokenized, and I'm still getting my head around that in a big way. And I kind of want to understand the last mile side of things. I come from a banking background, so with this tokenization, these utility tokens, and individuals and families and community participants that are involved in these impact projects, are they receivers of these tokens as well? For their, like let's say there's a cleanup project or something, and they do all of this stuff and hard work and they get rewarded in these utility tokens. Can they then take those tokens and utilize them in their local community, like a fiat currency for trade, to buy goods or pay for services or food or things like that? Is that kind of like the last mile extension of this?
It's a really great question, but before I kind of resolve that, I just wanted to thank Kana for presenting for the past 30 minutes. It was really lovely to have your participation, and we really welcome you to stay on and enjoy some of the other sessions. Shane, to your question, your session is right after Gay, who's on now, and then we'll have a little bit of time afterwards, and we can perhaps at that time, so that'll be in just over half an hour, we'll have a chance to explore that question in a lot more deeply. So that would
Awesome.
that would be terrific.
Thank
So thank you, Kana Leya. I don't know if you want to say a few words before we conclude.
Thank you so much, everyone. This is a continuing exploration that we'll have, of course, for the next decade. So it's a lot to unpack in 30 minutes. So I'd really love to encourage everyone to reflect on, thanks Adrian, to reflect on and be courageous with what you'd like to dream up, with what you'd like to create, whether it's on Unit or in your own lives, and the multi-layers of systems across, this, all the different fields of the world. Like, we need your voices and we need your contribution, and I'll look forward to seeing you and meeting you each in the field.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kana Leya.